Level up your success with the ICABA World Network, where accomplished Black professionals and entrepreneurs have created a thriving global ecosystem built from valuable connections and impactful collaborations. Be a part of a trusted network that uplifts, inspires, and enhances your success. Join like-minded and leading Black professionals to foster meaningful relationships, unlock opportunities, and access the resources you need to thrive in your career, business, and life. Go to ICABAWorldNetwork.com and join today.
Well, welcome everybody to Black Professionals Month. It is the Friday, October 22nd edition, and we are so excited. We are coming to the end of the fourth week of Black Professionals Month, and we have just had one really value-packed session after another. Earlier today, we heard from the killer pitch master, Precious L. Williams, and so today we are going to hear from Corporate for the Culture, that is Gabrielle Huey and Elizabeth Dunbar. And we are just really excited to have these two outstanding young ladies here to share their knowledge and their insights that they are going to be bringing with us today. Gabrielle was born and raised in Westchester, New York, which is a wealthy white suburb where privilege was at almost every doorstep. A biracial woman with a learning disability, dyslexia, she learned quickly that the system wasn't built to empower her. Therefore, her paths towards success had to be unconventional and that she had to empower herself. Gabrielle defines herself as a scrapper, molded by personal stories of dismissal of her intellect and ignorance, thankful for loving parents who taught her no one is below or above you. Her passion and work has been centered around understanding the individual mindset and how to unite a diversity of mindsets toward a shared objective, which has led to her focus on inclusive behaviors, teaming, and leadership. Gabrielle received her BA from American University, MBA from the University of Maryland, and she was recognized by Poet and Quant's Best and Brightest MBAs in 2017, and she now works for a Big Four consulting firm. You kind of get to know people by who they read and who they look up to. And based upon what I have seen with Elizabeth, in terms of her, she looks up to Maya Angelou. And the quote here, I think, says a little bit of it all. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. She was born in London and raised in England, Venezuela, and the United States. Her international upbringing as a third culture kid, someone that has grown up in a culture other than those of their parents. She couples that with her Jamaican heritage to help her to understand that the way she defined herself in the world and the way the world defines her are rarely aligned. She grew up learning how to engage with, assimilate to, and operate in different cultures, customs, and norms in each location to navigate and understand each society and her role in it. As her identity, particularly her Black female identity, was challenged in each society, she developed a fascination with the concepts of identity and belonging. She has a BA in International Studies and Interpersonal Communication and an MBA, and now works for a Big Four consulting firm in organizational change management. So I think that whether you talk about their personal upbringing and lives and backgrounds and experiences, or whether you look at their credentials and education, that both of these ladies have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience to share with us today, and we're looking forward to having it. And so now it is my pleasure to introduce and present Gabrielle and Elizabeth.
Well, thank you for the introduction. That was fabulous and well done. I'm going to present my screen, and I can't see any of our participants, so I'm not sure who we have on the line, but we're going to have some interaction throughout this presentation. So hopefully you'll be able to use the chat functionality if you have any questions. But we're really excited about this conversation today because it's extremely relevant. when we were giving our introductions and saying Big Four, a lot of people aren't familiar what a Big Four is, but that is really one of the big, huge accounting firms. So when you think of like an EY, Deloitte, PwC, that's what our Big Four. So we work for companies that are 50,000 employees strong in the US alone, but have global reach. And so we're always navigating different cultures. And so that's how Elizabeth and I came together to create and co-found Corporate for the Culture. We met during our MBA. We realized in working for these big organizations where you're navigating the corporate culture, your team culture, the culture that you live in every day, there wasn't any psychological safety or safe spaces outside of ERGs, employee resource groups, to really come together and say, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. How do I deal with the true systemic issues that we have in corporate America? What are the tools necessary to succeed? And the issue is we just don't talk about it enough. A lot of times we leave work and we don't even want to talk about work anymore. But for us to really be able to prevail and reach the careers that we all deserve, these conversations are essential. So that's what Elizabeth and I do with Corporate for the Culture, is that we bring in peers, middle managers who want to become executives in corporate America, is to say, hey, this is the reality. This is the experiences that other of our guests have had, and let's come together strategically and support each other to succeed. And so I know that we had our introductions already, and hopefully this is moving over here. But our purpose and our mission is, again, to dismantle the career system to provide the next generation of Black corporate leaders with tools and community to build the career they deserve. And so usually in every episode that we have, we do start off by talking about our dimensions of identity, but did a really great job in the beginning of introduction. So we'll just jump into our topic today. So the topic that we're talking about today is hybrid workplace. And this can look different for each one of us. Some of us have the opportunity to go into the office and are returning full time to the office versus some people are going completely virtual. And then hybrid in itself is a combination of those two models, right? So the hybrid workplace model is a working environment which combines remote work and in-office work. People are at different points in that journey with their companies. My particular company is just started reopening the office space, and I will tell you, I have a lot of anxiety around that. I don't know exactly how I feel. I'm doing a lot of self-reflection with Elizabeth and our guests in terms of what does it mean to be ready to re-enter the workplace? What type of intentional, conversations do I need to have, strategies, even frameworks with dealing with some tough conversations, or just the idea of like, depending on your personal health or who's in your immediate network, you may have different trauma or stresses that when you think about returning to the office and what that means to you. So during this conversation, we'll talk about the realities and the pressures and the true conversations and explorations that Black professionals are having when someone uses the word hybrid workplace or return to office. And we'll talk about things that you should be conscious about so that you can be intentional as you think about re-entering the workplace, if it's at a hybrid or fully in the office environment. And Liz, stop me if there's anything in the chat because I can't see fully because I'm presenting.
You're good.
Okay, perfect. So what is the problem statement, right, that's happening when we're thinking about return to office and the hybrid work? So it's interesting because there's a lot of articles that are coming out. There were a lot of surveys that were conducted to say, how are people feeling about hybrid work? How are they feeling about returning to the office? Because there's new ways of working and there's a variety of different work experiences over the last year that people have had. Right here on the slide, you can see, may not be shocking for those that are on this call, but only 3% of Black professionals want to return fully in person, 3%. Compared to white professionals, which is at 21%. So we're gonna do a quick poll to see if there's any participants that are able to interact now, but we really wanna understand how you're feeling. And when you see the stat of 3%. How does this make you feel? Are you returning to the office? We'll talk a little bit first to take a pulse check of who's in the room. So who here is returning to office, potentially doing hybrid? If you want to come off mute and talk, that's fine as well. But I think Liz is going to drop in a link.
Okay.
So Liz, as people are, go ahead.
So we have some people saying that they're responding that they are returning completely virtually. We haven't had any hybrid or full-time yet, and no to be determined.
So most people here are virtual,
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm hearing, Liz.
Yes.
That's super interesting. Okay, that's great. Yeah, for me personally, I'm still virtual now. I think, Liz, you're still virtual for some time, right?
Yeah, so I'm still virtual, but we did start returning, having people return to the office in September after Labor Day. Most people have not had to return to the office or wanted to return to the office just yet. And we're really seeing it as a slow transition to a hybrid workplace where people spend some of their time in the office and some of their time working virtually.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we did I don't know if anyone's familiar with Fishbowl, but we did a little bit of a pulse check to see how people are feeling. And we would love for you to take the time just to also share with us about how you're feeling when someone uses the word return to office or hybrid. How does that make you feel? What are your potential concerns? What are your excitements? Like, what are you looking forward to? I mean, I think these are very transparent notions of where people are, right? If you think about what we've been hearing from this pulse survey, people are really concerned about their mental health. They don't want to go back into an arena where they're the only one, where they're facing different microaggressions at different levels. There are funny ones in terms of your ability to turn off your camera when someone says something that you just don't agree with and we're rolling our eyes, to the fact of just having to be an educator in a room in a space where you didn't decide to step up into that role, or just having small talk conversations and culturally how that is difficult when you feel like you have to navigate so much and over-index into that code switching arena. So these are some of the sentiments that were shared in a recent pulse survey that we did with Fishbowl that talked about, again, how people are feeling about returning into office. Liz, do we have any reactions or anything in the chat? You're on mute.
So we don't have any reactions in the chat just now. I'll keep monitoring that. Oh, one just came in. Big red concerned. So someone is concerned, and we'll look at the other responses that come in, but I really like the responses that we had in Fishbowl. I think that my favorite response there is I'm going to lose my mind if I have to deal with Karen's face-to-face again.
Yeah, yep, that's definitely one of my favorites as well. Okay, yeah, definitely feel free to keep putting those in the chat and we can share them, because again, we want to have a trusted space and true conversations about how we're feeling. But so we talked a little bit around the landscape in terms of what hybrid work is, what initial kind of reservations people are having, and why Black professionals may not want to return to the office. But to prepare us for, even though most people said they're going for fully virtual, we'll talk a little bit about what are the things that you have to be mindful about if you're in the office. Let's just say for those who are virtual, you go in for one time, versus you can even thinking about it to the extreme of your fully virtual. How do you make sure that you stay engaged, that you get the right opportunities to make sure that you're still successful in the dynamics of certain, potentially your teammates either being fully virtual or some of them in the office while you are virtual. So we know that this new ways of working has a lot of uncertainty around it. It is very much in test phase. A lot of companies right now are figuring it out, right? Everyone's thinking about, what is my strategy? How do I drive engagement? We're all seeing the great resignation as people are leaving companies at alarming rates. And it's because people are starting to really reflect on, what is a purposeful career for me? What am I passionate about? And what type of environment do I want to work in? And there are some privileges to that in order to be able to leave your job, because some of us are in situations where we need our paycheck to survive. But for others, like the trend is very steep, where we had a huge amount of people leave in the last month. I think it was a record high, Liz, if I'm quoting that correctly. But these are 4 themes that we want to bring to your consciousness as you're thinking about this new ways of working. And those 4 themes are proximity bias, path of least resistance, microaggressions, and the Black trauma. And so when I think about, and I'll cover 2 and Liz will cover 2, but when we think about proximity bias, this is a new term. And as the definition stands, it's a subconscious belief that people will produce better work if they are physically present in the office. So first of all, I think the pandemic proved that wrong, because productivity for a lot of different industries, especially I have some friends in finance who work in banking, and they're usually working until like 3 o'clock in the morning, but they were reaching their numbers or hitting higher numbers than they ever did before. So that's not true. But what we do know about proximity bias and what bias is that it's a belief that can stand in the way towards building a successful journey if you choose a different path. So there's a hypothesis with who's going to return to office as those who are going to be early career. So university hires, people who are new to a job, new to a brand, and then white men, right? So there is a belief that white men will be at higher volumes of being in the office than other demographics. And so what that means is potentially these people, because they're in proximity of each other, will have water cooler conversations, create decisions where those who are virtual may not be able to be part of those conversations because they're happening outside the virtual meeting. And so this is something that you have to be mindful of in terms of what we'll talk about how to thrive in the next section, but really thinking about how do you engage in a virtual world. So part of that is making sure that you're always collecting feedback, that you're making sure that people are telling you the key decisions that they're making, and they're creating space for you to have your own opinion if you feel differently, or if you're validating kind of the pathway forward, right? So you have to have special techniques if some of your teammates are in the office versus not, so that you're always informed, you're up to date, and you hold people accountable of giving you that information. Liz, anything to add to that? I know you're on mute before I go to the next one.
No, that's great.
Okay, great. The other one that we're all very familiar with is microaggressions. But microaggressions will take their historical form and then also be reinforced through the new normal that will be created in this ways of working. And so one of the big ones that I always traditionally think about is that now race and politics are in office conversations. I know when I started working, you didn't talk about race, you didn't talk about politics, you didn't talk about money, right? But now with this new, well, for majority, this new awakening that they've had in the last year, there's a lot more, I would say, present ignorance, like right in your face ignorance that you may have not have witnessed before because of the level of sensitivity in terms of calling out your race in the office setting. So when this comes into mind, there are certain frameworks in thinking about, okay, if someone asks me about my Black experience across the last year or potential hate speech, I've seen that happen before with clients that we have worked with. For those who are more in manufacturing plants or supply chains, like hate speech is kind of an everyday, day-to-day, unfortunately, experience that they have. And the bigger one is like the notion of lack of compassion of leadership, because they may not, if they don't walk in your shoes, it's hard that they say, then it's hard for them to understand. And so that's the one thing that hurts Black professionals and dealing with microaggressions in the office, is because of that lack of compassion. So all of this in terms of the level of consciousness that we need to have is the notion that microaggressions are going to happen. It's the reality, and it could potentially show up in different ways that you don't expect within this new ways of working. So the best thing to do is to understand how do you want to protect your mental health and gearing yourself up to deal with these microaggressions. We all deal with things differently, and that's okay. I'm a very much in your face, call you out type of person, but that's not for everyone, right? So it's good to just have that in your mindset before you go back into the workplace. What is the framework that you're going to use to evaluate the investment that you want to make in a coworker's ignorance or a microaggression that they use? And, how do you want to discern, disarm, define, and potentially challenge that microaggression? I think at the end of the day, when we think about mental health, it's how do you want to show up in the moment that it's not sitting on your shoulders for long periods of time. It does not mean that you have to address it right in the moment. If you're someone who needs to cool, calm down, and collect your feelings, that's great. Know yourself, and then take that action later. But again, this is something to be mindful of because it's going to look the same and different and potentially more in your face than ever before. And so it's something that you want to be conscious about. Elizabeth, I will pass it over to you for the following two.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to talk about path of least resistance. So we have all been experiencing the ways that work has changed in the pandemic, and managers are no different, leaders are no different. They just have a little bit of a different perspective. So I want to talk about that. So if you are an individual contributor, you probably report to a manager, and then your manager reports to an executive or a higher up leader. And one of the things that has been researched during this pandemic is the effect of the pandemic on middle managers. And that's really something that I want to focus on. But let's start with the C-suite. 75% of C-suite executives that were surveyed by McKinsey said that they expected the typical employee to be in the office 3 or more days a week. And that wasn't because of efficiency, as Gabrielle mentioned earlier. People can actually be more productive when they're working from home because they don't, have to socialize with coworkers as much, and, all of the other things, people making demands on your time, you have a little bit more control. But what it did do was made it difficult to build culture or sustain the culture and create a sense of belonging, which for executives is really bad, because then what differentiates working at your company from working at another company? There are a large number of people at the moment who are currently considering changing jobs or have already changed jobs in the pandemic. And there are some additional people too, I don't know if you saw on the slide earlier, that one person was concerned about going back to the office because it means that they would have to get rid of their second job, which they picked up in a virtual environment. So executives are worried about retaining their talent. But for middle managers, they are feeling the pinch. If you're an individual contributor, you might have felt better working virtually. And if you're an executive, you might have felt better working virtually. But the problem that middle managers have is that they don't have as good of networks as the executives. And they are also having to manage people that are away from them. They can't see what they're working on. They don't have a lot of transparency. And it's really hard to keep tabs on people when they are at home doing what they do versus being in the office. And you can just walk over to the desk and be like, hey, what are you working on? So those managers have really felt the pinch, and they are more likely to go back to the office in person. So 91% of middle managers said they had trouble working remotely compared to individual contributors and executives. So because they are more likely to go to the office, they're also more likely to favor those that are in the office with them that they can keep tabs on or that they can network with. So there is the potential that if you are a worker that decides, okay, well, I really liked being virtual, or maybe you can't go to the office. We are still in a pandemic, and there are people that have disorders that mean that they can't, go to the office to risk additional exposure, or maybe they have childcare concerns, whatever the case may be. Those people may be put on the back burner in the minds of those managers and also in the minds of those executives. So the question here is, if you're going to be virtual, or if you are hybrid, but not really in the office so much. How do you make sure that you are not an afterthought? And the problem is there are not going to be measures in place in most of these companies to make sure that you are prioritized, because Black professionals are already a minority in the population. We've already said that only 3% want to return versus 21% of white professionals. So there is a huge risk that we could be left behind. So what we recommend here is to make FaceTime. Make sure that you are in the face of your managers, your leaders, so that they know you, especially people that have changed jobs in the pandemic. There's a good possibility they've never seen someone in person from their office. But we just want to make sure that people are in the minds of their executives and their leaders. So another element that we identified here is Black trauma. This has been a massively traumatic time for everybody. Going through a global pandemic is an experience that like no other. But in addition to that, Black Americans have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So we've been hospitalized at rates of 2.8 times more than white non-Hispanic people, and 2 times more deaths in the Black community than in the white non-Hispanic communities. So even if Black professionals have not had COVID, and they may have had COVID and may be experiencing, the after effects of long COVID, or have had a very, acute case of COVID and have recovered from that, even if they haven't, it's likely that they know someone who has had COVID, or know someone that's positive COVID, or just has the anxiety of knowing that, this might affect me more than it could affect someone else. So that stress of worrying about your health, the health of your family, can affect your performance, or just really your willingness to want to go back to the office. So those are the COVID considerations. In addition to that, we've had tragedies like the killing of George Floyd, and many, many others. And it's not that this is the first time, it's that it compounded an already difficult situation. And additionally compounded was the fact that there was that awakening that Gabrielle was talking about earlier, where now suddenly other groups of people are interested in knowing about our Black experience and constantly mining for our trauma. And it's really hard to create those boundaries when your manager or your executive is saying, okay, so tell me about your Black experience. And you're thinking, okay, is this part of my performance review? What's happening here? So there are those additional pressures too. So these are all things to be mindful of. I am sure that these are things that you've experienced, or that you've thought about at least a little bit in your return to the office, or into a hybrid environment. And really, I want to identify some ways that we can help you to thrive, or some things that you can think about in terms of starting to thrive in the hybrid and physical office. So the first one is setting boundaries and setting expectations. Some companies will mandate that you go into the office, or they will mandate that you stay virtual. Whether it's your choice or whether it's not, I think you have to carve out what that means for you and how you're going to show up in your workplace. So for example, if you're going to be virtual, as I mentioned before, set the expectation with your leaders that you're going to meet with them every 2 weeks, or that you're going to set some time aside with them that you can meet, identify some things that you want to work on, or give some progress status updates, and just connect with them as people as well. It doesn't always have to be professional. You want them to get to know you as a contributor, as an employee, but also as a person, because the social element has really been taken out of work in a virtual environment, and it will continue in the physical office in a hybrid environment. But if you are a virtual worker, you're going to miss out on those opportunities, and that's sometimes where deals are made and promotions are handed down. So you don't want to be left out of that. Setting boundaries. For some of our employees, or for some of our Black professionals, a boundary is going to be, okay, well, maybe I don't want to be in the office 5 days a week, but I will be in there 3 days a week. And if someone wants me to come in 4 days a week, that's my boundary. But they should be clearly communicated in the beginning. And that's a conversation to have with your managers, with your leaders, also with your teams. And I know a lot of teams at the moment are developing plans for how they want to work together and what collaboration tools, how much FaceTime they're going to have. So that's a conversation to have first with yourself, but then also bring to the team how you can show up if you are going to be virtual or if you're going to be a hybrid worker. And so that is just a couple of examples of setting boundaries. I know that we're running to the end, so I want to get as many of these tips out as possible. Build trusted communities. So because there is strength in numbers, we want Black professionals to come together with people that are like us, that have the same concerns as us, but also people that can advocate for us too. So it's really important that we get together and present concerns that we have to our leaders in our teams. And if we are not getting the support that we need, we find people that can support us in those pursuits. Anything else to say about that, Gabby? No.
No,
Okay.
I think you summarized it well. I do. I mean, she knows that this one is a big one for me because of the fact that, to her point, just kind of nailing the nail here, but it's really important because everything is so new and so uncertain, and things are going to be coming up, like new things are going to be coming up every day, and a lot of these companies are testing strategies, process, programs out, that if you don't like something, that you find other people who don't like it. They don't have to be Black professionals, but just people in general that have the same concern, and come as a united front to present that risk, that challenge, that complaint to leadership. That is the best method to create change. So I just want to kind of restate what you already said, Liz, but obviously you know that I'm big on that particular item.
Great. Thank you for doing that. Amplification is great. So, Johnny, you asked about keeping receipts. We like to make sure that we document everything that we've done and everything that we've experienced as well. So, for example, if you are experiencing microaggressions, harassment, whatever it is in the workplace, definitely take notes about that. I just want to remind everyone that a court just ordered Tesla to pay $137 million because an employee was called a racial slur, and I'm not trying to leave money on the table. If I'm going to be treated poorly, I'm going to need my payday, so I need those receipts. That's how I feel about that. But on the other side of things, it's what did you accomplish? Especially in a virtual environment, there isn't as much, there may not be as much visibility to the great work that you've done. So are you documenting what you've done? Are you sharing that with your leaders? A lot of the time you'll find that, white men love to tell you that they, they changed a light bulb. That is what we need to be doing to advocate for ourselves, especially in an environment where we're not necessarily seen as much because we're not, full-time in our leaders' faces. So that's what we mean by keeping receipts. We've already talked about the regular feedback piece, but you can also get feedback from your teams. It doesn't have to be just your higher ups. It can be your peers. It can be the people that work, that support you. Make sure that you are learning about how your colleagues want you to show up and ways that you can show up better. And it's really important to take care of your mental health. So make sure that you are resting and reviving. There is so much PTO left on the table. Americans are terrible at taking vacation. I have become culturally American in terms of taking vacation. So 2018, 55% of Americans didn't use all of their vacation time. That is time that for some companies, if you don't lose it, you use it. So you are paying to be in the office. Now it's 2020, and since 2020, 92% of Americans have canceled, postponed, or did not book PTO. So that is just time that is just languishing there. We're all kind of burned out, frazzled, all of those things. So definitely take the time because it is yours, and don't let people make you feel bad about it. Set those boundaries, set expectations, and set people up for success while you're away. And breathe. Breathing is so important, especially, we had the person earlier say, if I have to deal with a Karen, I'm going to lose my mind. Breathe. It's such a useful thing. One of my favorite things to do before a stressful meeting, or if I've just dealt with someone who is making me tear my hair out, is box breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts. Do that 4 times. You'll feel great. It was developed by Navy SEALs to deal with really stressful situations. So if it helps Navy SEALs to get through, war zone situations, I think it'll probably help you to get through that meeting. So these are some of the ways that we would like to recommend that you thrive, but I'm sure that there are ways that you have learned to cope with this time, and we'd love for you to share those with us too.
All right. Well, I know we wanted to leave some time for if there were any questions. These are some of our upcoming episodes. We are actually doing a series on return to office, where we're having different career coaches to psychologists to some chief diversity officers, and then peers. So other Black professional managers really talk about things that they're predicting, how to take advantage of the hybrid workplace. And then the one that we have here is also about managing teams. So I'm a manager. So what Liz was talking about in terms of being in the middle and being pinned, like how do you manage teams when some of them are virtual and some of them are in the office? What does that look like? So having those conversations as well. But yeah, we can open it up to questions, and really appreciate the space and the dialogue.
Well, ladies, this has been really good, and I'm pretty excited about the work that you're doing here with this podcast. How long has the podcast been in existence now?
A year? Almost a year. Liz, you're on mute.
Yeah, we had our first episode back in, I think, the end of November, so you're right, almost a year.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, we're in our inaugural year for Black Professionals Month, and I'm sure with you being in your inaugural year, when you started out, there's a lot that you learn, and you're continuing to learn as you go along. And you build your audience, you tweak your content, your delivery, your format, all those kind of things you're paying a lot of attention to figure out what's working best. One of the things that when we launched Black Professionals Month that was very built into the DNA was that this was not going to be an effort that was going to end October 31. And I've been, building communities for Black professionals since 2009. And we're going to extend what we're doing so that, as we talk about sometimes, Black Professionals Month is not just a month, it's a movement. And I'd like to, create a space to list your podcast on our platforms to create a level of awareness that we can help to generate with that. And so I'm going to follow up with you guys after we get out of here. I mentioned that November 1, I'm going on vacation. I think I mentioned earlier to Gabby, but when I get back, would love to do that. We've got a little over 13,000 in our network here. And, one of the things we're trying to figure out, as I'm sure you guys have had your own experience with, trying to convert the in-person crowd, where we, over the past 12 years, have done about 200 in-person events, to virtual has been kind of interesting, and I think we're going through a period right now where the content that's available out there is a bit overwhelming, but I think that it's also going to shake out because everybody won't be able to sustain, everybody won't find an audience that will be able to, that will stay with them, and the cream somewhat, if you will, rises to the top. And so I'm kind of counting on that natural process taking place and making it easier to gain a little more traction with some things as there's less traffic on the road, so to speak, distracting people from things that may be a little bit more, substantive and long term. Having said all that, do you find what I'm saying to have any experience, or you're having an experience that would either counter what I just said, or does it affirm what I just said in terms of building out virtual audiences these days?
I think it depends. I think it depends what kind of platform you have, and what goals you have. So I think one of the things that we have been testing out in this first year of the podcast is, what are the best social platforms to use? How do people engage with them? How does our content translate to this platform? And it's been trial and error. We have been using lots of different platforms. We've been trying to engage our audience in different ways, and they always surprise us. What we think is going to be the case is never the case. And the things that we're like, oh, this probably won't do very well, things that we pour lots of time and energy into, we're like, okay, maybe we reassess next time. So I think it's a case of trial and error, and just as much exposure as possible on as many different platforms as possible, because you never know which one is gonna, be the one that hits. What do you think, Gabrielle?
That's true.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, we chose a virtual platform using a podcast. We never actually, we got a lot of more traction than we realized doing that podcast, that brought us into events like this, which has been just such a blessing to expand our voice and help scale out a lot of stories that we've heard through our conversation. I think for me personally, the challenge is just, there's a lot of opinion pieces out there. Like for us, when we're more about education and awareness, there's just a lot of different voices in this moment where everyone feels like they want a piece of it, right? Like, yes, we're at like the Black experience, at least it's at a focal point, but a lot of content is more geared towards making white people feel better about the situation and trying to give them some like entry points into the conversation. And there's lack of substance. But those podcasts, because podcasts now also for us is like a booming platform, it's hard to break through all of that noise. And so I agree with Liz that for us, it's been about the right partnerships. It's been about like really making sure that with those partnerships, those people like post our content. You would be surprised. I don't know if this is still being recorded, but you would be surprised. But with these conversations, that because of the lack of protection that Black people have, like some of the stories that people will feel safe in telling us on a podcast, they then don't want to post out in the world because they're not sure what the repercussions are going to be when they go to apply for a job, right? Or if like, so they want to, what I've realized is that even though we don't want to create pockets of just for Black people, we also need it at the same time because of the safety net that it provides us to have real conversations and be able to share those conversations. Because if we post it on a Spotify or we post it on LinkedIn, all of a sudden I'm making a lot more edits to my content because people just don't know who's going to hear it, how they're going to receive it, and what type of future impact it can have on their career. So that's like actually our number one challenge that we're having more than anything else.
Oh, that's really well said and well taken. I'm going to just say thank you to both of you ladies, and also to our attendees for being here. We are recording, and all of our sessions have been recorded and will be available in the World community in the Black Professionals Month Mastermind group for you to catch the replay, as we like to say. And again, Gabby, Elizabeth, thank you so much. Really, really great information, great insights. And I'm going to close this out right now to stop the recording. And then I just want to finish a conversation that we were just having, but I wanted to go ahead and close out first. So we'll catch you at the next Black Professionals Month event. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.